Hello, everybody. This is Baruti Carl Alexander, and this is Minding Our Own Mental Wellness. And this discussion is recovering from unhealthy relationships and starting over. And everybody pretty much has been through a unhealthy relationship. Certainly, everybody has been through relationships, and we're going to talk many facets of that. We're going to look at many different aspects, perspectives, and try to answer some questions and come up with some answers as well as deep discussion where we get a better understanding. So, first, I would like to let our facilitator and host, I would like to ask her about the question of why people stay in unhealthy relationships. I have a few theories myself, and let me see what you think about this. Love, that's one. Now, it's a lot of things that go with that. I mean, you could be in an unhealthy relationship and be in love. I mean, those two things are not separate. Then we also have different things such as different levels of tolerance. Certain people have different levels of tolerance. What might hurt me may not, you might not can stand for that. So, I mean, people look at things different ways. And so, what you might think is somebody messing over you or treating you bad, I might not take it that way. So, it's different levels of tolerance, low self esteem, certainly. You haven't built up your self esteem. So, you believe, hey, I got to stay in this relationship because I might not get another one and I can't survive without a relationship. Um, Also, you don't recognize that you don't have you are in an unhealthy relationship. You don't recognize that. Maybe you don't see the signs. Um, the last
Mhm.
thing is it could be nefarious and strategic. You just waiting long enough so you can get what you want. What you think about those?
Uh, I agree, and it's just based on, human experience, right? I mean, realistically, what happens is we get the foundation of what relationships, healthy or unhealthy, even though it's normalized a lot of the times in what we saw when we were children, in our parental caregiving relationships, how they nurtured us, how they interacted with their partners. And then those beliefs are then associated with what we emulate as adults. So if you see an inconsistent partner or abuse or a parent tolerating the abuse of another person or just a maltreatment or whatever else, then that's normalized for us. Now, sometimes what we tend to do is the opposite. So we didn't like that. We knew it was unhealthy, and then we try to be intentional about doing it differently. But we miss the warning signs sometimes in those instances when we are. In regards to love, I think we do have an expectation of what society tells us what love is, especially on social medias and things of that nature, television shows and that kind of thing. And I think that that definitely impacts what why we would stay in unhealthy relationships, right? Because then you want them to, you believe in that potential. They used to be me. Oh, I used to be a potential believer. Oh, he has this and he has that, so I can help him with this because even though he was financially unstable, then I can see his potential, and then I would work towards trying to help them through that, and that was the most addicts toxicity, right? Um, Also, sometimes we want something more than the idea of something more than we are looking for it to be healthy, if that makes sense. Uh, like I just want to be married, but I'm not willing to, settle. At the same time, I do settle for the things that I experienced before that didn't work just to be married. People do that a lot.
I understand that. I also want to say it depends upon the timing. You know, give myself as an example. Me and my ex-wife could get along and work a lot better today than we could 15 years ago. So you might not be ready to be in
Mm,
that particular relationship at that time because you're not mature enough. But you can be maybe later or have some different experience. What has been your experience, Natasha? What you think?
Um, well, one of the questions that comes up for me is how do we, in response to your question, why do people stay in unhealthy relationships? Is how do we define an unhealthy relationship? I always like to start with that question just so people can think about how they define it because like Jennifer says, based on our life experiences, so my life experience could be different from yours. So my definition of what I consider to be an unhealthy relationship may be slightly different from what your definition is. So I think that's always a important place to start at, a nice starting point with opening this dialogue for people to just kind of reflect on what they consider to be unhealthy for them and why. As far as why people stay in unhealthy relationships, one of the things that came to me is misdirected grief. Sometimes people are in unhealthy relationships and they're totally oblivious because they're kind of like in a comatose state because the relationship is a coping mechanism for their grieving process, and they don't realize that subconsciously that's why they're in that relationship is, rather than emotional eating or some other form of coping. A toxic unhealthy relationship is a way to cope because it's a form of escapism from the pain that grief triggers. So that's been like one of the perspectives that I've seen and observed with just us as human beings and how we respond to different things that happen in life.
Can you give me an example? I'm thinking about, somebody who has a very low self-esteem, who they allow their mate, significant other, to really just talk down and kind of treat them in a way that you know good, you know good. If you don't stay with me, you ain't gonna be nothing. So, but that because of their trauma they have been through, that is how they are feeling at that time. Is that somewhat what you're talking about?
Yeah, because it could be that unhealthy relationship is validating some of those. Remember, we've had in our former conversations about those schemas, those narratives. So when a particular trauma happens in our life, especially the loss of a loved one, that's one of the ones that really could send us into a subconscious comatose state, and we're like within internalized, we're inside this cocoon within ourselves, and so we're in these relationships that's kind of validating and speaking life to those different things that we're pondering, or we're trying to navigate through the different emotions and different thoughts that comes up as a result of that traumatic experience that has us in a place of grieving. And we don't realize that we're using that toxicity of that relationship to kind of medicate the pain that's associated with that grief. And then it just, a moment will come and kind of wakes us up and like, okay, I need to get out of this. I need to get out of this state as far as grieving and really engage and be intentional, as well as the relationship. So that's been one of my observances. Yeah.
One thing that I went through, there was a time when I really wanted people to like me, and I tried to do things to be liked and so forth. And I found that they didn't necessarily treat me with respect if I didn't. I just acted in a way that I didn't put up boundaries, and we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. But when I started acting in a way, okay, I don't care whether you like me or not, I got so much more respect. So it's a crazy thing. Brother Times, how you doing? How you doing, Brother Times?
Doing pretty good.
Okay, we talking about why do people stay in unhealthy relationships? And what I said was love It could even be strategic, low self-esteem. Those are three of the possibilities. I think I said a couple more, but why do you think people stay in unhealthy relationships?
Well, I think it depends on who you ask. I was in in a couple, and it was something I just didn't want to give up on the person, if you know what I mean. I kind of wanted to make things work. It was kind of like that simple for me.
I've been there.
Uh, you don't want to, you don't necessarily want to end something because some people see what is that cliche, the glass half empty, and some people see the glass half full. I'm one of those glass half full type of people, so
Me too. Me
i'm
too.
look I'm looking for the best, and even when I'm getting some of the worst, I'm still hoping for the best, and I'm trying to plant seeds and trying to, that kind of stuff, and in hopes that, okay, well, let me give it some more time, or let me, go to therapy with, but the problem with that is everybody not on the same page, you know what I mean? And so you get this, push pull business. So that, it's that. I've talked to people who've gone through trauma. I work with this young lady, beautiful young lady, had good upbringing, no issues at her home, right? But she ended up in an abusive relationship with a guy that liked to beat on her, liked to talk bad to her, talk down to her, and stuff like that. She stayed in that relationship for 7 years, and she's a therapist, and
Why did
ended up.
you? Why did you? Or why do you think she stayed there? What did you figure out or surmise?
Well, what he said to her, he attacked her person. Told her she didn't, she wasn't pretty, or she wasn't this, she wasn't that. He isolated her from her family. Classic abuse type of strategies. He gaslighted her, and so what she did was she overcompensated. Well, maybe if I do this, he'll not do that, or maybe if I do that, and she ended up really in that relationship entirely too long, estranged herself from her family, and all of that. And she ended up with a lot of emotional trauma because of it, and the funny thing is, I ended up actually kind of coaching her, mentoring her actually, over a period of 2 years. And she was about to get married to a good guy that wasn't like the other guy. And right before her marriage, you didn't ask this question, but right before she was about to get married, like 30 days before, she freaked out. She had an anxiety attack and that kind of thing. And I had to talk to her about what was going on. And so there were some residual effects from the previous relationship. So, but she stayed for various reasons, and so yeah, that's kind of what I. But I've seen that with other marriages too. People try to stick and stay, and for various things. So yeah, it's I think it's different for everybody a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is different, different reasons, different factors, different variables. What are some specific signs, Jennifer, of unhealthy relationship? I know if somebody's hitting on you, that's one sign. You got to put a halt to it, at least in your planning in your mind. If they are abusive in their conversation, that's another sign. But lack of communication can be a sign also. Isn't that right? Okay.
I'm using
Okay.
my phone and don't never so I couldn't turn the
Okay.
mute
I'm
off.
sorry. It's all
I'm
good.
sorry about that.
Did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. I heard you say that you asked me what the warning signs were of a toxic or unhealthy relationship, and I know that that's what Natasha was highlighting as well, is understanding those signs and learning or identifying what they are. Because and that's a part of what I was saying as well. If we are brought up viewing unhealthy relationships, then we won't know those signs unless, either it got to the point where it was unbearable, right? Or we, start to identify in other healthy relationships. Because we're talking about relationships, but every interaction with other humans that you interact with regularly, we're talking about right now intimate relationships. But relationships are relationships. There can be coworkers, there can be friends, there can be a lot of, and they all can be unhealthy, and they all can be healthy in different ways. And we have to be able to be aware of what that looks like, and what works for us, and what doesn't, and what we need. But you did say earlier, Baruti, that boundaries is something that you lack in relationships, and that was what
Used to,
made them
maybe.
unhealthy, I think. Right, in the
Yeah.
past, right?
Yeah.
But you recognize that you needed to change that because your needs weren't getting met, or the relationship wasn't healthy. Because people, if you give them permission, they gonna do what they can to benefit them, right? That's just a normal human response. And if we don't set limits, then uh, that happens more than not. And then we start to have less confidence in ourselves and our confidence in relationships and being able to build them when we don't have healthy boundaries. And boundaries are limits that you set on someone else for your protection. So that's like a fence, not a wall, because we don't know the difference sometimes. Yes,
I
sir.
just want to say, before you can get to boundaries, you have to be able and learn to communicate. See, you can have a boundary in your mind, but if you're not able to speak it, then it's nothing really. Because you can say, I don't like this person getting up this close to me, but if you don't tell them that, you just keep it in your head, they don't know what you feel. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people have that problem. They have it in their mind, but they can't share it. I would say I used to not be able to share it, but I have no problem today. And
Yeah.
that's what changed. I used to have all those ideals in my mind, but I was too shy to say something. So it
But let
meant
me ask
a
you this,
level of
Baruti.
maturity also, huh?
But why did you feel like that was something that you shouldn't do? It was a reason. It didn't magically just come from nowhere.
Sometimes I was just scared or shy to speak up because maybe that person wouldn't like me if I spoke up.
Mm-hmm.
Or I was
Yep.
just maybe intimidated to speak up. You
Yep.
know, it could be
Yep.
a lot of reasons. But
Yep.
and as I said, okay, I don't care as much whether they like me, but I am going to set what I think is right for myself.
Yeah.
So once I got to that level, things started to change. And that was probably, I'd say 15 years ago, it started to change. So it took a long time, but
Yeah.
thankfully it still did. Um, what are some other factors that can be seen in unhealthy relationships? I mentioned somebody hitting on you. That's a no-no. The verbal abuse, that's a no-no. Lack of communication also is a big one. If you have something on your mind and the other person, or you have a concern that you want to share and
Mm-hmm.
that other person doesn't want to hear it. Now, I have this with my sister. She just wants her way, and if I don't respond to her way, she shuts off conversation. She says,
That was it.
okay, I don't want to hear it.
And
Now,
that was one
let
that
me
I was going to
say,
explain.
we are getting a lot better, but my brothers also are a part of helping the situation become better because they put it out there on the spot where she can't hide. And that is causing everything to come out. But everybody doesn't have that particular situation. And the other person just says, I'm not going to communicate with you unless you come to me like I want you to in that particular way. Has Natasha, you ever seen a situation like that? And isn't communication so important in having a healthy relationship? You You on mute.
Okay, I forgot I muted myself. Yeah, absolutely. Communication is important. I actually one of the things that I wrote down, especially when you two spoke a little bit about boundaries. Boundaries as well as effective communication when it comes to relationships are a result of a healthy relationship with self. So if we don't have a healthy communication or interpersonal intellect, like we have healthy dialogue within ourselves, then there's some misfires and blockages and things of that nature when it comes to communicating with others. So it really, when it comes to being in healthy versus unhealthy relationships, it really begins with how well we're cultivating a relationship in and within ourselves individually and how we interact with one another collectively. So,
Very much so. And people can come to you and they already have a standpoint in their mind and they bring it to you and you have to try to decipher or filter around that. I had that situation recently. But at some point, if you not are not able to have a clear communication with them, and then they have one with you, you first can't come with preconceived notions, because that will cause a a mess up in your communication. You have to have a clear communication. That's been my experience. Brother Times, what has been your experience with effective communication?
No mind reading. Uh, real good at, I used to be, I can tell you, I used to be real good at emulating what my dad did, which was not a good example. He was old school, grew up on the farm, didn't talk much, that kind of stuff, had a hard time communicating. And so it was one of those, that was a big issue in his marriage. And I took that to my marriage and I thought I was communicating, but the truth is I wasn't really communicating as well as I thought. I.e., expectations. What is your expectation in this marriage or this relationship? Going into it, never laid it out. Just made assumptions that theirs were the same as mine. Well, that's not true. You see, that's not true. And so therein came conflict. Yeah, and the sad thing is when you don't have good premarital counseling or marital counseling at all, you tend to trip up. You think you're doing the right thing, but you just modeling after what your folks, like Jenna was saying. You modeling after what your folks did. Because that's all you know. And so it's and then a lot of times if in the black church and black folks didn't go to therapy. We went to our pastor. And the pastor, he would just say, just stay together. You know what I mean? God don't like divorce. Well, that don't help because, I need some tools. You know what I'm saying? And so, you get a lot of that. And so people stay in hook or crook. And and unless something bad happens, then that's when you get the domestic violence and all this crazy stuff. Things happen unexpectedly in relationships. I don't mind telling you, I had a horrible marriage, and my first wife pulled a gun on me. You know what I mean? Yeah, a loaded 38, my own gun. You know, but what I didn't know was the woman had schizophrenia and her whole family had it, didn't know about it, never talked about mental health because we don't like to talk about stuff like that. And so I found out on accident. You know, the woman was roughing up the kids. She was doing all kind of stuff. Ended up being hospitalized after I had divorced her because I was afraid for my life. And so, but we don't talk about family history. I remember in my family, I think my dad said something about one of his cousins was crazy and everybody laughed. But nobody talked about, you know what I mean? The
What it
minutia.
was.
you know,
Mhm. Mhm.
so it's a lot of that stuff. We're not educated. Sometimes we want to bask in our ignorance.
Yep.
And that's yet another key. And I find it's not just with black folks, white folks too. I ran into a lady just the other day at the school where I teach at, and something how or another. I said I was a therapist, and the woman ran. She literally ran from me. Science teacher ran like I could have been the boogeyman. You know what I'm saying? And so people don't want you to know what's going on in here, and they bring that to their relationships and so forth. And so when people are hiding things, not giving you information that you kind of need to make a good decision, shall I be with this person or not? I'm sorry, but we don't. My old director used to say at the old counseling center I worked at in Virginia, she said, Chris, we don't use that word crazy because yeah, sometimes it just applies. Yeah, you're crazy. You just, it is what it is. So we don't want to talk about stuff like that. So people cut it, put it under the rug, and they might just, hide it just by being angry. I got a client right now. Uh, she's got lots of issues like that, but her poor fiance has no idea. You know what I mean? And so, it's kind of like, wow, but she masks it in anger. I'm pissed off at my
Mhm.
employer. I'm pissed off at my fiance. I'm pissed off but the truth is, the woman's got a prolific history, family history of schizophrenia. Mother had schizophrenia. Uncle has bipolar disorder. You know what I'm saying? So, but she hadn't shared none of this with her fiance. You see what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, oh my gosh. So we tend to hide things like that. If we got heart disease, we don't hide that. You know, we got high blood pressure, we don't hide that. So we need to kind of come clean with some stuff. And I don't know if I'm probably rambling at this point, but yeah, it's a lot we need to not overlook and be more intentional with
But
with
certainly in our
okay.
community, it has been a stigma. It has been a deep stigma for a long time. Just now it's getting a little bit past that, but even more in our community. Let me ask this question. Does history of mental illness or schizophrenia or some other type of mental illness in your family, does that say that everybody is going to have it? Or is it some type of trauma has to trigger it? Jennifer, let me ask you that.
No, suppose. I mean, there's the family history. That's like you have a family history of heart disease, like Mr. Thomas was saying, right? And you live the same lifestyles as your parents, eating the same diet, not caring for yourself and being healthy. Doesn't mean that you're going to for sure have the heart disease, but your lifestyle, and if you're living like you were taught to live or saw them living, it'll be more likely that you'll have it. And it doesn't necessarily mean a trauma has to incite that either. It could be a trauma can trigger some responses in regards to mental health and maladaptive behaviors, but realistically, that's not necessarily a cause or an effect of that, if that makes sense. So, yes, it is based in your hereditary aspects. I have type 1 diabetes. That is a hereditary disease. It was nothing that I could do. I was 11 years old and I got it because it's in my family. So that mental health can be like that, but it also can be how you are, nature versus nurture principle, right? Nature is that hereditary aspect, and nurture is the other one, like the environment you live in, how you live your everyday life, how you manage stress, those types of things, which is also an issue in this world and time now, and then also definitely for Black people, because that's why we don't want to express the mental health concerns and the difficulties, because it would be used against us, and then everything else is also against us. So then you have to protect yourself, and that's why that stigma's there, right? So
Certainly
I mean
understand
that
that.
that all is related. But I still do want to get back to what you asked me initially, because I never answered the question
Okay.
in regards to relationships. You asked me what the warning sign or what toxic or unhealthy relationships look like. And I know Natasha brought it up, but we didn't actually answer the question, I don't think.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, inconsistency is one of the most prevalent signs of toxic relationships, like lack of presence. Like even if they are physically there, right? They're there in the home with you. They right there in your face, but you know that they're not connected, they're not present in the moment because they don't engage. They don't provide supportive feedback. Usually it's highly critical type behaviors and communication forms. A sense of trying to isolate you from the people that you love and are closest to is also a form of toxicity. Um, a lack of positive attention, you know, someone that is always just, oh, okay, well, just getting it done or whatever else, but never acknowledges your accomplishments or just say, shows affection in a way, unless they're not, as long as they're getting something from it, then they do. Those types of things are concerning. If there is envy or jealousy, like over, you can care about you and want your partner to be yours and yours only, but there are limits to that. It might be real cute at first when you just really want, you know me to be around you or that kind of thing, but then after a while it gets excessive, and when it's in those excessive, they always jealous, they always asking you, going through your phone, going through that's not healthy. And trust and communication is the foundation of relationships. That is not healthy. Anyone that speaks negatively about you, that you're in a relationship with all the time, and you don't hardly hear anything positive, that's a problem too. Like that's not that doesn't motivate me. They're not to change anything. You want to hear something that is good about what you're doing in that relationship, because it's supposed to build you. But the problem is in relationships, people want someone to complete them, not add to their lives, right? You build together in relationships. And I mean any form, dating, romantic, whatever, and also friendships, co-workers. So like you want to bring something that other person may not have as a strength to that person's life, and it's not. It's if they're not doing that or they're just taking all the time, that's not a healthy relationship. And of course, if your boundaries are disregarded, if you need something, you say it. I'm not comfortable with this, and then they blatantly continue to do it. That's not a safe relationship for you, because boundaries are for your protection. So that's all I'm gonna.
Understood. I've seen many people that they have to be right all the time, and they can't be vulnerable to say I'm sorry
Mm,
when they did wrong. That is unhealthy. That's an unhealthy relationship, and I recognize that. But I would say, maybe 15% of people have that personality, and yeah, it's always an unhealthy interaction if they can't be real, because everybody makes mistakes, everybody
that's true.
does something wrong, and if you can't admit that, that is a problem. But there are many people like that. Let me ask this: what are some key steps to surviving, thriving, overcoming, and then starting over once you leave this difficult relationship? And it's different for everybody. What do you think, Natasha? What's the key? Now, one thing I want to say, and I tell my daughters this: don't ever tell the man that you are having difficulty with. Don't argue at him and say, I'm leaving. I've learned that from talking to people, because, man or woman, they might get upset and they may snap at that time. So get to a safe place and then share that. if you are in that type of contentious relationship. So I want everybody to know that out there. So what do you think, Natasha?
Before I answer your question, I wanted to just kind of add a little something to what Jennifer said, because I like how she brought up the envy and jealousy part. Another component, the flip side of that that's unhealthy, is when they're always competing with you, is what, like trying to always outshine you as well as also. So envy and jealousy isn't always comes in that form of possession, like, who you around. But it's like, always wanting to be the one that's outshining the other person. That's very, very, very unhealthy. Okay. Because like she said, our healthy relationships is about building one another as well as with one another. And that type of spirit does not build one another. So to your question, what are some keys to starting over after leaving a unhealthy relationship? One, allow yourself to grieve. Really allow yourself to go through the grieving process. Because you're in transition. You're transitioning from one place to another once you've left the unhealthy relationship and you're making the decision to start over. So allow yourself to experience those emotions of grief that may come up. I would say even during that grieving, just journal, like really journal and release some of the residues and things that come up during that time. Also, you really want to disengage in the journey of self-discovery. Don't be so quick to attach yourself to new relationships. Really find solace in that time frame of being with yourself, by yourself. Reconnect with things that you enjoy, your hobbies, some of your childhood dreams, that we just kind of put on the shelf because of the responsibilities of life and things of that nature. Just like rediscover yourself and build that healthy relationship with self. And then start first with cultivating new relationships from that place. So if you're reconnecting with a hobby that you put on the shelf, such as creative writing, start reconnecting and building new relationships by joining a creative class, writing class, to where you're connecting with like-minded people if they enjoy that particular activity too. And then that helps you get around the right people. So then when you do really start to build a new romantic relationship or whatever type of relationship you started from, you're not going back to an unhealthy place. You're recognizing what's now healthy for you because you've allowed yourself the time and space to rediscover exactly what that is. And then you put yourself in environments where you could be around like-minded people that can help you in that transition of your from unhealthy to healthy journey. So those are some tips that I have right off the top of my head.
Yes, ma'am. Very powerful. I have been through many of those myself. Just doing this show and the Source Seeker Hour, I was a kind of a different person before I started this journey. But through this journey, I built my self-esteem to a high level where I can now talk to a big crowd and not feel very intimidated. And it's helped in so many different ways. And I did go through a difficult relationship in so many different ways. But of course, me and my ex-wife have grown together. And that's why I was mentioning at one time, you might not be ready for that. But then at another time, you might be more mature. So it's a timing thing also. Unless that person does not want to try to grow and change. And you have those people too. What are some things that you should do to help your self-esteem once you get out of an abusive relationship, Brother Times? What do you think? What's been your experience?
Self-evaluation. I need to go in, be introspective. What feeds my spirit? And maybe I don't know. I love what Natasha said about that that piece about, you know, self discovery. We can get lost in our partners easily, and it's
Hmm.
easy to lose yourself or parts of yourself in those types, especially if you're doing, you know, some pattern behavior. You know, it's easy to lose yourself. So stepping back and reintegrating. What do I need? Right? Um, Maybe I have no idea. Great. That's a good place to start, you know, and finding out. I tell folks, you know what? For the grieving piece, love that. Uh, Integrate the self discovery. And oh, by the way, um, you know, I need to do some other things to help nurture me. Walk on the beach or whatever feeds your spirit. I think is super powerful. Maybe it's taking a class or getting another degree, or maybe it's taking up a hobby or reconnecting with some old stuff, you know, that you hadn't done in years, or maybe, you know, that kind of stuff, because you need to rebuild who you are. When you're in toxic relationships, it takes so much away from you, you know, and, you know, and maybe the things you say if you're in high school and you get with somebody and you with them for 30 years and things fall apart, can't be fixed, you try to go back to some of the things you did 30 years ago, you're not that person anymore. So you're going to have to figure out, allow yourself some grieving time and figure out during that process, who am I? And that's okay. You know, maybe you don't know. I tell folks all the time, allow yourself 2 years minimum to recover. And I know that seems like a long time, but it's really not a long time, especially if you take that 2 years instead of, some people get just angry, and that's okay because that's a part of your grief cycle, but don't stay there. You know what I mean? Get angry and keep it moving. Allow yourself to process the grief. Some people get stuck there, and that's not what you want to do. But yeah, feed your spirit. And I love the boundary thing Jennifer talked about. That's 100% accurate. You know, create some boundaries. A lot of times in relationships, I can speak personally and clinically from clients of mine. Um, Most of the time, they were having problems on the job or other interpersonal relationships with their parents, with their significant other, because of what Jennifer said. Pull boundaries, you know. Um, I did, what did somebody tell me the other day? Just 2 days ago. I do everything for my family and they don't do nothing for me. Well, that's a problem. I I told them, well, start telling people no and don't explain yourself. You don't have to explain yourself. You just don't feel like it. You know what I mean? And that's enough. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you don't even have to know why you don't want to go out with your friends and have drinks.
Doesn't that depend on who it is that you're talking to?
Nope,
You would like to maybe
Hmm.
explain
nope,
to, okay, no,
nope,
okay,
nope.
okay,
I don't care if I'm gonna be a little crass. I don't care if it's your mama. No,
okay,
you got to set those boundaries. You got to set those boundaries and reinforce them. And then after you figure out what those boundaries are, what's healthy for me, what's okay for me, what feeds my spirit, then you can start adjusting that. But until you because what got you in the mess is the boundary issue number one. And of course, there's a spiritual issue too that I believe has an effect also. So you know, there's it's not a one type of thing, but there's several things, and those are the things you find out, I think, in discovery.
understood, understood. Some very revealing information. And I hope somebody is listening and is helped who really wants to understand about their relationship and relationship with others. We are at the end of our program. Jennifer, can you guide us, clarify us, sum up this about recovering your self-esteem?
Yes, but I also want to normalize something as
Okay.
well. I think we all need to know and understand that our brain craves familiarity, right? It's safe when it's familiar. Even when it's harmful, that's what we crave. Our brains crave because if it's familiar, traditionally it's safer. It's more comfortable. We know we feel more confident if it's familiar. So if you are in an unhealthy relationship, it'll be harder because you're familiar with having relationships such as that before. Then it'll be harder for you to identify that it's not a healthy one, right? And an example of that is just knowing, just growing up, that in being black, because we all black here, that our parents really didn't acknowledge our emotion, right? So like, if you feeling something, you got to stay in a child's place or go to your room or that kind of thing. That's what I grew up with. It was not necessarily acknowledging that emotional aspect. And so for me, that taught me that I need to deal with my emotions by myself alone. And a lot of the time in unhealthy toxic relationships, that is what is being dismissed, your emotional response to situations. So if we are familiar, our brains create that familiarity, and you learn how to take care of that on your own and isolate or whatever you do to maybe self-medicate, like Natasha was saying, with continuous relationships, then we continue those same patterns, and then we don't recognize when they're unhealthy. To be able to build on our own confidence and our self-worth, because a lot of that. Oh, also Natasha was talking about something that reminded me of codependency. And codependency is just leaving yourself behind for someone else because that gives you some sense of validation or self-worth, in that, and that is definitely unhealthy too. So in all of those things, we can't do anything about them until we identify that they're a problem first, and then looking at our other ended relationships. That's a healthy way to move on and move forward, is acknowledging what did work, what didn't work, what did I do that contributed to it not working, and then how do I take care of myself so that I can identify that, because learning, life is about learning, and you're not living unless you're learning. Right? And if we're not learning from those situations and those relationships, and I think that saying, we people are in our lives for a reason in the season, is still very true. But we can always learn from, even if that season is over, we can learn what worked for us and what didn't. And so if we are always in that mindset, not trying to hold on to things just because of a label and things of that nature, and knowing what we bring to relationships, and our negative traits that contribute to difficulties in them, we can make changes towards having healthier relationships overall. Now, something that you did say, and my therapist brain kicked in then, when you were describing about your daughters and telling them that, don't tell them. That sounds like a fear response of something that happened to you or something that happened with one of your children before, because that's a boundary, right? If you have healthy boundaries, now I understand why you said if it's with that type of tumultuous relationship. I heard you, but that honestly doesn't allow you a healthy relationship if you've been through that before, to be able to communicate
I'm
what you
thinking
will and
it's
won't
already
accept.
gone past the healthy relationship. It's gone to the place of unhealthy. That's why I would
Okay.
tell them that it's already
Okay.
in that unhealthy spot, and you're not trying to save it anymore. You're just trying to survive at that time. You're trying to make sure you're safe.
So only if it's a relationship like that, not every relationship. Is that
No,
what you're
but
saying?
you have to have communication if you're trying to
Okay.
have a healthy relationship. Yes,
Okay. All
yes,
right.
ma'am.
I just want to make sure, maybe I something got lost in communication, but I do understand what you mean in regards to that. But it just sounded like a fear response when you said don't ever tell them that. So that's why I mentioned that. But either way.
Well, I mean, if you got to help, there are certain relationships you can say, "Hey, I'm leaving. You get your stuff together, and you do what you got to do. I'll do what I got to do." Yes, you can recognize that, but I'm saying when you have a unhealthy relationship and it's gone to the point of where you are arguing, also the tone has gotten very abusive, and there's possible he's hitting the wall and all these kind of things. You don't know what he's going to do next or she going to do next. Like times were saying, he had to get out of there because he was concerned for his life. So I'm talking about in that realm. So
Okay.
yeah,
I get you. I hear you. I just think it's going to be important for us all to know that patterns break as soon as we identify familiarity. If we look at what we're consistently doing and recognizing that it's not safe, but we're telling ourselves that it is because it's familiar, that is the start of healing.
understand. And
Mhm.
reflection and honesty with yourself is so important. You got to be honest with yourself. Hey, this is not feeling good. You can't keep telling yourself, okay, I did something wrong, and you're getting this bad feeling, all the time, and you can't just say, okay, what am I just doing wrong? Now you can ask yourself that, but if you're honest with yourself, really honest with yourself, you'll know that it's just not me. Yeah, it does take two to tango, but hey, you got to be honest also. So
Mhm.
I understand.
Yeah.
We are at the end of our program.
Can I say something?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Yeah, because Jennifer just really highlighted something that even goes back to what Mr. Times was saying when it comes to marriages, the miscommunication of marriage. And so when she said if you're raised in a household where you're being taught to deal with your emotions by yourself, then we carry that in our marriages, and now there's a lack of intimacy and communication because we don't have the actual skill set to involve someone else in that process. And so we could be going through things as a married couple, and then we, on the other side of that trial, tribulation, we're in different arenas because we were processing it on an emotional level separately and not collectively. And that is just like a major point. That's a takeaway for me. Okay. I'm up here ready to, when we get off here, go have a conversation with my husband. So to bring us even closer, because I'm just like, wow. Because even when Mr. Times mentioned the premarital counseling, that's one of the things that we would always say that it's ineffective because they'll focus so much on the roles, like the role of the woman, the role of her, and how you're coming one and living your life. But they don't focus enough on the communication component and how you are engaging in the process of becoming one as you're going through life together. So unexpected job loss or X, Y, and Z may happen, but we're focused on the roles to make sure we stay afloat, but we forget about the emotional component to where we're having that connectedness where we're processing our individual emotional responses to the same situation, because if those situations are very subjective, my emotional response may be different from his emotional response and vice versa. So I really wanted to highlight that because that's a great nugget for all of us to take moving forward with cultivating healthy relationships, being mindful that we want to continue to build our skill set in involving others in our emotional process when challenges and misunderstandings occur, as well as our skill set to help someone else if they don't lack those skills in that area. So to extend grace and be patient with people, because it's just the culture that we live in. many of us have been subconsciously programmed to deal with our emotional responses to challenges in life in solitude and not really invite someone in that process to where we're working through that together. And that's healthy. So yeah.
That is a
Definitely.
very important point. A lot of these young men and men in general, they have been taught machoism. You don't, be vulnerable to your mate. You tell her what to do, and it's respect. You're strong if you get her to do what you want her to do, and she doesn't question you and so forth. Now that is not as much today, but that is a culture that men come through. Not as much today, but back in the 50s, 60s, on up into the 70s, much more so. And you still see that in young men today. I have a young man in my life that I have to interact with that he's still trying to learn that, and it's causing him to have a problem being able to stay on a job because he has difficulty being able to take direction. He doesn't want anybody to tell him what to do, but there's proper roles. And we talk about relationships. You have to learn relationships, goals, and how to interact in the world. And there's so much we could talk about as far as relationships. And it's a vast subject, and we're going to come back to it. Brother Times, talk about as we get ready to go out, get ready to end our episode, talk about healthy relationships. What does healthy relationships look like? And then tell us uh, where people can reach you also.
Okay, well, a healthy relationship. First, you have to understand: have I done the work inside of myself first? Have I done? Do I know who I am? Have I done all of that? The self discovery and all of that, and then and then not necessarily looking for somebody to complete you, but is this person my a good balance for me? You know, I can be left brain and maybe need a right brain. They don't complete me, but we're good balance. Their value systems, do they match up with mine? Uh, Religious systems and so forth. Child rearing. Do we agree on all of these points on finances? How do we handle these types of things? What do we do when we fight? We don't talk about that before we get together or even start dating. What do we do? How do we fight? You know what I mean? And those types of things. Instead of waiting until we fight and get married and fight, and have to go to marriage counseling and counselors trying to detangle a mess. Go into it with your eyes open. How are we going to fight? No uppercuts, no low blows. This kind of stuff. We don't talk about any of that usually in dating or in courtship, and just say, lay all our cards on the table, and then that helps both parties come to the situation. Maybe this isn't the person for me. You know, maybe I can find a better match, or and then the other piece is always good. Maybe I need to go talk to Natasha or Jennifer, uh, bounce some things off of them. You know what I'm saying? Hey, I'm thinking about this cute girl, but I don't know. What do you think? Because I might be love struck, or I might be lust struck, or just whatever. I'm not looking at all of the things that I need to be looking at. So, just being open and honest and genuine, I think instead of the whole idea, and I don't know, the romantic, we want to build a narrative in our minds that, right, that we were taught, we saw it on TV, whatever. And that don't work. Didn't work for me. Didn't work for anybody that I know, not really. And then you end up with a person you might hate. You might hate them. You might decide that, what was I doing? Nobody stopped me. You know what I'm saying? So that kind of thing. I think those things help, authentically build a relationship from the beginning. Oh,
Understood.
and you can
Go
get in
ahead.
touch with me. I'm at the Marmo building in Galveston, Texas, at 2121 Market Street. And my numbers, I don't mind giving my number, 409-761-0076. And you can see me on Facebook, and that's pretty much it. Yeah. And Google. I'm on Google also.
And I want to mention that April 19th, we are hosting a mental health seminar in Galveston, Texas on generational trauma, 12 p.m., April 19th. 12 p.m., April 19th at the Marmo Center. So we'll have information about that online, and you can check it out and come see what we're talking about, and generational trauma, an important point that everybody goes through. And you gave the information on how they can reach you. Thank you, Brother Times. Sister Natasha, your final statement on how people can build their self-esteem and healthy relationships. What are healthy relationships?
Well, my final statement as far as healthy relationships is that we all demonstrated healthy relationships today with our conversation and dialogue surrounding this topic. Just being courteous of one another's perspectives, considering one another's perspectives and building upon that, to really bring great dialogue and insight to the subject matter. So I believe we did an excellent job today demonstrating what healthy relationships look like and how healthy relationships communicate with one another. You can find me on all social media platforms at Freedom Coach in Miller. And yeah, that's all. Thank you again for having me. I'm so
Thank
happy
you
to be
very
here.
much for coming. Appreciate you. Our professional counselor, Jennifer Cain of Adorn Counseling, please sum it up. What are healthy relationships, ma'am?
I was looking at some quotes, and two of them stood out to me, and I wanted to share them with y'all. The first one, a healthy relationship doesn't complete you; it celebrates you as you are. And the other is, well, it's actually multiple. Love thrives where kindness and understanding are nurtured daily. And that speaks a lot, right? A lot of the times we are looking at relationships based on what we can give somebody else or what they can give us. And that's where uh, the problem starts. And that's why that we all, I think, in some way discuss that complete word. I have a metaphor for that. And I think I used this on the show some years ago, but it's so true still. Uh, if we're thinking about relationships as cupcakes, we are the cake aspect. We don't need somebody to come in and make our cake complete. Put eggs and flour and all the ingredients to put that together to form our substance. Because the cupcake, the actual cake part, is the meat of the whole cupcake. It wouldn't be one without it. But what we want our relationships, our partners, and intimate relationships specifically to be is the whatever you like in addition to make you even better. The
Icing.
icing, the
Yeah.
sprinkles, the ice cream, those additional parts. So you are not, if you're looking for someone to help you move towards your purpose and all these other things, then you got to work on you first. Like Mr. Times and Natasha said, we all have said the same thing. We have to know who we are to be able to be that icing on that cupcake for someone else. And if we don't know that, we can't expect someone to bring that in either because you're looking for them to be your eggs. And that's not healthy. And if you start out in an unhealthy manner, it's going to maintain that way the entire time. And then at some point throughout the time of that relationship, it's not going to be a healthy one at all. Even though it started unhealthy in the first place, it's going to get even worse because we hopefully grow and learn in life. And then those relationships tend to end when we never actually understood ourselves from the beginning. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
That was
I think
profound. I'm gonna have to rewatch this, take that down, just state it, and work on it. So thank you for that one. And
no
the audience
problem.
thanks you, I'm sure. Yes, ma'am.
No problem. I'll be busting a little cute knowledge in there sometimes in the therapy sessions too. So, uh, so you can reach me on Adorn Counseling. You can Google Adorn Counseling. Adorn Counseling means counseling made beautiful. And you can find me at my website at adorncounseling.com, as well as all social media platforms, TikTok temporarily, I guess. And
Mhm.
that's my
Well,
favorite. That's one
they
of my
brought it
favorite
back.
ones. I know, but it's for 90 days. We gonna see.
Yeah.
But Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, you can find me at Adorn Counseling there too. Um, yeah, and I'm glad to be here today with Mr. Times and Mr. Tasha. It's been a pleasure. And you as well, Baruch. Excuse me. Let me not forget the host.
Thank
I'm
you,
sorry.
thank you, thank you very much. Hey guys, it's been a great show. I learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did too. I
I
think
did.
we're gonna talk about it with Natasha, and maybe we're gonna do part two because this was very informative, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we can discuss. And we want our audience to have a firm understanding of what we are saying so that they may get a further understanding and something that would help them. Well, this is the end, and we will be back next month, and we're going to let you know what date that is, and minding our mental wellness. And we believe in the concept, the guidelines, the conversation of overcoming our stigma for mental illness discussion. So thank you very much. We'll see you in a month, our next show. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.